Wells is a great city, but it's the most beautiful location. I briefly lived here. It was hard to believe, it's such a stunning environment. Wells has got a really open attitude to creative arts. There's so many things going on. Time and again you're aware of festivals, obviously the Literary Festival. You've got lots of other things going on like the Wells Art Contemporary and the Cathedral. But it's the most beautiful little city. It's hard to believe it's not make-believe. And of course that's why you often see film locations being shot here, because it really is the most stunning place. I was delighted to hear that Antony Gormley's work was going to be coming here to the west front of the cathedral, and I came alongside here deliberately to make sure I could see it being installed. I remember then, for instance, thinking how big the piece was. It was human size, it had a scale that I would recognise from many of Gormley's life-size casts, but with the more abstracted structure here. But then, of course, once it's up on the cathedral, suddenly it feels small again, and it feels slightly reduced. You begin to sense the whole scale of the cathedral. So just on many levels, to begin with, my first response was how big this space is, this huge Gothic facade, and then how interesting to see this modernist object sitting amongst it. Slightly uncomfortably, provokes a lot of reaction, but really interesting and prompting lots of conversation.
It's great that it's become a talking point. I mean, from the moment it arrived, you couldn't walk past it without coming across couples or groups of people discussing it and saying what they felt it described, how it made them feel.
I have to say, I'm looking out at the West Front now, and what an amazing privilege, really, to be able to continue a conversation that has gone on for maybe 300 years. I'm passionate about the Gothic because it is about people coming together to make stone do things that it would never do naturally. It's a celebration of, in a way, trial and error and knowledge that comes from engagement with material. For me, if this is the first arrival of French Gothic architecture in Britain, what an incredible thing to be able to kind of quietly become part of it.
Surely art isn't meant to be easy. It shouldn't be a good fit. It should be a considered fit. And in this case, it fits really well physically in that space, but it prompts a conversation because it provides some friction. It's something other. It feels as though it's kind of landed in this space and is asking you to ask questions and consider why it's there, what it's proposing, why now in relation to the past. It just brings up so much to talk about and think about. It's just a delight to have it here.
It's called doubt. Doubt is the engine of truth. It's a tiny addition on a Gothic masterpiece, but hopefully what it does, it's like a grain of salt that suddenly allows all of the implied meanings and flavours that are in that facade perhaps to become more apparent.
Well, on one level, as a sculptor, I make things. I'm interested in the patina and the colour. I love the warmth of it, the lovely chestnut brown. Reminds me of the queen bees. I'm a beekeeper. So there are lots of things that strikes me just in terms of its materiality. For me, it also makes me feel about that notion of an equivocal relationship with parts of the world and the kind of bigger stories, in this case, religious faith. And I think the idea of having a sculpture that feels slightly unsettled, is deliberately got its weight shifting, is reaching out. It doesn't sit comfortably. That's really interesting. And as a sculptor, that makes me think about ways to present practice. It doesn't always have to be neat, tidy, straight. It can deliberately be a bit awkward, which can be very exciting.
I chose that corner quite carefully. I wanted it to be, as it were, on a kind of turning point in terms of your narrative of experience and coming into the company of the cathedral. But I also wanted it to be the closest it could be to the ground, while at the same time expressing something of actually what it might feel like to be about 6 meters off the ground, which is quite a long way. And I was thinking, what would it be like to be on the windy corner of a stone building, night and day, rain and shine? The work, in a sense, is an attempt to evoke that feeling. And it comes out of me actually taking up that position. So it's a captured moment of lived human time.
The question of doubt to the medieval mind was clearly much more of an issue than it is to the modern mind. Indeed, I think that to most modern people with a faith, they would see doubt as part of that faith. It's part of what allows them to question and to seek truth and to make things real.
it's another way of engaging with sculpture that isn't to do with recognizing something that you already know about, but discovering something maybe inside yourself that you then project onto this space that is adequately open while being adequately determined. In other words, there, lasting, serious, made. Yeah, I think that's the most magic thing of all about what sculpture is. Sculpture is a still, silent thing in the world that is, in a way, a bit of an obstacle. But it maybe makes you move around it, and it makes you ask that question, what the hell is this thing doing here? And maybe it returns that question to you and says, yeah, well, what are you doing? And what are you feeling? And what are you thinking? There are multiple ways. You can get right up underneath it and look up its nose, as it were. Or you could look at it from very far away, from oblique angles, see it in relation to the whole of its architectural context. I'm hoping that the real subject of the work is not in the work, it's in the viewer. And maybe the sculpture can allow the viewer to find things in him or herself that resonates with the work. Maybe that's asking too much, but it does need work. You have the work, but then you also have the beholder's share. There's something about, perhaps, uncertainty, vulnerability, openness to the world in a material that actually probably is more long-lasting than the sandstone of the facade itself.
We can't live in the past. This isn't a set. This is life, and we've got to continue building and addressing the new. So the idea of bringing something so shockingly new and straight-edged to this older space is very much where we need to be, isn't it? If we're going to prompt new conversations and ways of thinking and looking, it can't just be copying the past. It has to be something else.